In this video, we are going to have a look at one of the most spectacular games ever played in Wijk aan Zee, the famous Dutch coast town, holding traditionally in January its tournament, formerly called the Hoogovens tournament, later Chorus tournament. Now it's a Tata Steel Chess Masters, but this year it's edition number 86. But before we are going to talk about that event, which is about to start in a week from now, we are first going to have a look at a game played in 1995. It's the Pearl of Wijk aan Zee with the white pieces Cifuentes against Zvjaginsev. And this game has it all. It's a beautiful game, one of the best games ever played here in the Netherlands. There are other brilliant games as well, which I'm going to cover in the next couple of videos. But first, let's have a look at this game. Cifuentes goes for 1d4, black goes for e6. If white wants, he can transpose to the French defense after the moves e4 and d5. But that's not going to happen in this game. Knight f3, d5, c4, knight f6, knight c3. And after the move c6, we have the Slav opening, the Miran variation. e3, knight bd7, queen c2. All pretty standard stuff. There are various ways of handling this opening with both colors. White has a bit of more space, but black is looking for counter blows. First, he's going to do something about that bishop on c8, which is not a good piece. Therefore, the move b6 is played, so the bishop will quickly come to b7. Bishop e2, bishop b7, castling kingside, and bishop e7. So far so good. All normal moves have been played. I would, with the white pieces, probably go here for a move like b3, followed by bishop b2, then centralize the rooks, and at the right moment, try to open the center. I always believe that white has a somewhat more pleasant position, but black is very solid in these lines. Anyway, rook d1 was played, also kind of a logical move, opposing the queen, even though the file is closed. Yet, if it comes open, then who knows, maybe the rook can cause some damage. And white has a different idea in mind. After the move, castling kingside, rather than playing b3, bishop b2, white goes for the opening of the center with the move e4. Pawn takes, knight takes, and black places the queen on c7, the last move to complete your development. The rooks are connected, and at the right moment, black will seriously consider playing the move c5, after which the bishop from b7 comes into the game with very good prospects. What should white do? Well, interesting moment. I would think that white should really try to prevent black from activating that bishop on b7. And he can do that by taking first on f6. If you do take back with a knight, then a very standard way of handling such positions here is the move c5. So you're supporting the pawn on c5, preventing black from carrying out that pawn break. Unclear position. Anything can happen, but black has to prove that the bishop will not become a long-term problem. Anyway, was not played. Instead, white, having a space advantage, decides here to keep pieces on the board. Played here the move knight c3. And you may think, what's the knight doing here? Well, it's becoming clear after the next move. After the move c5, black getting in that pawn break, white plays the move d5. So the knight is supporting that pawn. Black captures and white does recapture. White is having a passed pawn now. And you got to be careful. There are ideas for white to play moves like d6, attacking both the queen and the bishop, followed by knight b5, attacking the queen and the bishop as well. So there are tactical ideas, and therefore the move a6 is played to make sure that the knight can never jump in to the b5 square. d6 is not a problem here because the square is just nicely covered by the black queen and bishop. White, what should he do? I think something like a4 does make a lot of sense, preventing black from expanding on the queen side. But white has a different idea in mind. Played here the move knight h4. Ambitious move, as the knight is on its way to f5 to attack the bishop on e7. And therefore, black played the move g6, covering that f5 square. So the knight is sort of stranded, but because of that last move, the bishop can be developed here to h6, hitting the rook. And where should the rook go? That's a very interesting question. Well, in the game, Zvjaginsev play the move rook f e8. Logical move, placing the rook on the open file, and who knows, the other rook can quickly come to d8. But perhaps rook f d8 with the idea to attack the pawn on d5 very quickly with the move knight e5, so that the knight on f6 and the bishop on d5 as well as the rook on d8 are teaming up against that pawn on d5. Well, that's a very direct way of putting white under pressure. Rook f e8, it's also a good move. Queen d2. So white renews the threat of playing d6. The queen supports the advance of the d pawn. Therefore, the bishop goes to d6, blocking the passed pawn. And the big question in all these sort of positions is whether this pawn on d5 is a weakness. Can it easily be stopped, or will it become an asset? Well, at this point, it has been nicely blockaded by the bishop as well as the knight on d7. So the d pawn is not getting any further. It's a sharp position. What white should do is playing actively, energetically. And that's something Cifuentes didn't do in this game. He played here the move g3. I will show you first what is better. It's this move, knight f5. The knight can come into the game, hitting the bishop. Of course, the point is that the knight cannot be taken because of queen g5 with check. If the king goes into the corner, it's checkmate, thanks to this bishop. Knight f5 is a good move, but it is really sharp. Now you're sacrificing the pawn on h2, and it's not clear you do have sufficient compensation for it. But probably this is something white should have gone for. In the game, they followed the move g3, preventing black from capturing the pawn on h2. But here, black seizes the initiative with the move b5. It's a queenside majority, and these pawns, they can come forward. At some point, maybe you're able to create a passed pawn. But for now, the main plan is just to kick the knight away from c3. Bishop f3 played, supporting the pawn on d5, and after b4, attacking the knight goes back to e2. Various ways of continuing here. I like a move like knight e5 to attack the bishop. Looks like a very nice activation of the knight. Knight e4 was played, also a good move, attacking the queen on d2. And if you do take with the bishop, bishop takes, rook takes, black is controlling the only open file. A lot of piece activity exerted on this e file. Knight is coming under threat, and with moves like knight f6, very soon black is probably able to wrap up the pawn on d5 as well. Therefore, white doesn't capture the knight, goes away with the queen to c2. He's attacking now the knight on e4. Black protects it by bringing the other knight to f6. But you see that black is gaining the momentum, having a very nice grip in the center. The knight goes back to g2. Can no longer go to f5, obviously. White is trying to hold its position together, but black is dominating here. How should black make progress? Well, in the game they follow the move queen d7. Probably with the idea of getting, for instance, the queen to f5 to hit the bishop, and indirectly the pawn on f2 as well. Logical move. The machine nowadays has also other ideas about this position. Bishop f8, trying to initiate the exchange of bishops. It's a beautiful idea because rather than recapturing, the machine says, I want to go knight g5. And the reason is that the bishop is no longer on h6, preventing the knight from coming to that square. So you're able to eliminate the bishop. If you go back with the knight to h4, you take on f3, knight takes. Now you do take back on f8. And next, the pawn on d5 is about to be taken. So here, white is in big trouble. Was not played in the game. Queen d7 looks very logical, but does give white some time to consolidate its position. Knight e3 played here. So the queen cannot come to f5. Rook 88, finally the remaining piece is joining the action. But it's not really clear what's happening. Maybe a move like rook c1. White can do the same, getting the rook involved as well. Instead, they follow this move, bishop g2. White is dropping back with the bishop, saying that his king's position is relatively safe. But can you see the killer move here? It's a beautiful shot, and it's the start of the Pearl of Wijk aan Zee. Pause the video for a second if you want to think a little bit longer, subscribe to the channel. And then I will show you what happened because black, Zvjaginsev, played here this move. Knight takes f2. That's a huge shot. You may have maybe even considered this move. And after king takes f2, think, well, I don't see the follow-up. Don't feel ashamed because it's not easy at all. But the key follow-up here is rook takes knight. Eliminating another defender. If you do take with the king, then it's knight g4. With a knight fork, king goes away. You take the bishop on h6. You're on exchange down, but white is lacking coordination. King is unsafe. Black is having a very strong potential attack here. Critical, at least more critical from a human perspective here, is the move bishop takes e3, but now knight g4 check anyway. If you go back with the king, it's knight takes e3 with a knight fork picking up the exchange. That's not good. You got to keep the bishop defended with your king. King f3 first. You take the pawn on h2 with check. The king goes back. Now the knight goes back as well. King f3. Repetition is possible, but there's also a very nice way to keep the attack going with the move. Queen e6. Amazing move. Placing the queen on the square where it actually cannot be captured because of the pin. But it's beautiful to place a square, to place your queen on a square where it's just covered by an enemy's pawn. What should white do? Not easy to say because black is having ideas to take the bishop on e3. For instance, if you do play queen d2 to protect the bishop, there's rook e8. And all black's pieces are about to join the attack. This looks really bad. Also, offering the exchange of queens doesn't help white at all. After the exchange of queens, there follows rook e8. King gotta go away. And then it's knight takes e3 on the next move. White is losing material. So therefore, Cifuentes, move the bishop away. Bishop f4. Of course, you can exchange the bishop here, but much stronger is to continue the attack with the move rook e8. The rook has done its job on the d file. Now it's on the e file. If you do take on d6, you're not going to recapture, but instead you infiltrate with your queen on e3. Therefore, the bishop was really needed to keep control over that square. Now after king takes knight, it's bishop c8 with check. All these squares are nicely covered. The king cannot come back because the bishop covers that square. And if you go king h4, it's queen h6 with checkmate. Beautiful line. This was definitely seen by both players. And therefore, white has to find an alternative. He played here the move queen c4. Protecting the pawn, protecting the bishop. If you do exchange bishops, then the queen is able to recapture. Everything is under control. But now, here we see the real reason why this game is called the Pearl of Wijk aan Zee. Pause the video here for a second again and find the brilliant move for black to win on the spot. Actually, it's not on the spot. You have to calculate a little bit deeper, but fantastic move here. The move, queen to e3. Queen sacrifice is not checkmate. You can take the queen, obviously, but then it's rook takes e3 with check. Knight covers the rook. Knight also prevents the king from coming back. The king cannot come forward because the bishop covers that square. You have to take the knight. But then it's bishop back to c8. The bishop gives a check. All these squares have been taken away by the king. King goes to g5. If you go to h4, by the way, then there's just the move bishop e7 with checkmate. King cannot come to h5. Beautiful mate. So, as I said, king g5 is the only move. And now, another beautiful move is pawn move. h6 with check. You gotta go after the king. The pawn was captured in the game because if you go to f6, the only other square, the bishop goes back to e7. The rook covers the bishop. The king cannot go anywhere. This is checkmate. So, king takes h6 played. And where is the final move of the game? Can you see it? Can you win by force? Or, well, this is also important. Whenever you go for a king hunt, make sure that you deprive the king from its remaining squares. And that's what Zvjaginsev did in the game here. He played beautiful move, rook e5, silent move. It's not a check, but the king cannot come backwards. You're threatening rook h5 with checkmate. After something like bishop f3, then the second mating pattern becomes clear, because the bishop, once again with the backward move, goes to f8 and it's checkmate. None of these squares are available for the king. This is checkmate, and therefore after the move rook e5, Cifuentes resigned. This was played in 1995, almost 30 years ago. Beautiful game. I hope in this year's edition 2024 we will get to see many more beautiful games like this one. Let me know what you think of this game, or are there any other games from the Wijk aan Zee traditional tournament you would like to see it covered on this channel. I will cover more interesting games very soon, so stay tuned.